Well, hey, everybody, Mike Griffith here. Welcome to tonight's Ingles on the Beach show. A little delayed reaction there on my phone to start things out. Man, we got a lot to talk about tonight. I guess let's just dive right into it, right? Everybody was tuned in to the G-Day game. Unfortunately, the replay isn't until Tuesday night. It's like one of those, what's up with that, right? I mean, the game's Saturday, and apparently there's all these other SEC game replays, and yet we're still waiting on Georgia's. So the only thing I can think is, they want to build the suspense up, right? They know everybody's going to be tuning in to watch that replay. I know I will. I wish there was a way I could have taped it. There probably was. I probably should have gotten with my producer, Micah Carvel, and said, hey, how can I tape this if I'm streaming it? But I actually watched the game on my laptop. There's still really no access for the reporters at the games. Everything is, via Zoom. And for me, I like the TV angles, and I liked hearing what Jordan Rodgers and Cole Cubilic and Tom Hart had to say during the game. They had some good backstories. Those guys meet with Kirby and the staff, and they get a lot of good insights. In fact, I talked with Cole and Jordan the night before the game. They call me and say, hey, what are you hearing? What do you think? And I share what little I know, and they share, a little bit, and it really comes out to help the product, and I think it gives us a better perspective. So I guess my biggest takeaway is just how comfortable JT Daniels is in the offense. And I know that's, you might say, well, that's not breaking news. We saw that the last 4 games of the season, but really it is, because he's come that much further along. I mean, he was about perfect. I know the numbers say 28 of 41, 324 yards. And you go, well, there were 13 incompletions, Mike. Well, yeah, but there was 3 drop passes in there. And there was probably 4 or 5 JT threw away. And then there were probably a couple throws he wanted back, and a couple times when maybe the receiver wasn't in the right spot. But when you look at that proficiency, when you're talking about a quarterback that's completing 2/3 of his passes, it's pretty strong, and the thing that he showed you was that he could make all the throws. And we saw him lay off a lot of passes to the running backs. We saw Zamir catch 6 and Cook caught 7. I mean, that's 13 balls to your backs right there. That's 13 out of those 28 completions. Then you throw in 4 more, 1 more to John Fitzpatrick. I mean, that's half of his passes that are going to running backs or tight ends. And it kind of goes along with what Kirby told us it would be like when George Pickens went out. It was, well, who's going to replace George Pickens? And the answer is, well, nobody, everybody, nobody and everybody, right? There's not going to be one receiver that's going to slide into George Pickens' position and make all those catches. Now, you did see Adonai Mitchell at that X spot where George was at, and he was targeted 13 times. We'll talk about Adonai in a minute. But getting back to JT, I think the word that Kirby used a couple days before the game when he interviewed with Chuck Dowdell, by the way, who's retiring from his sideline duties, and congratulations to Chuck. I know he's a very popular figure, a great pro, and a guy I've got a lot of respect for. But in that interview, Kirby said that JT had this great command to the offense. Command's not a word that a guy like Kirby Smart throws around lightly. And delegation isn't something that Kirby does with his football team, his Georgia football team, his offense, unless he's just got a ton of confidence in a guy. And I think that's what I saw at the G-Day game. I saw all that confidence that Kirby Smart has in JT Daniels to run that offense. And Kirby also talked about how, JT's knowledge of the playbook, his mastery of this offense, this Todd Monken offense, has really raised the bar in the room. It's helped guys like Carson Beck and Brock Vandegrift out. I think Stetson Bennett was already a pretty studious guy as far as watching film and knowing the playbook. But it's helped those young guys come along because, look, they're competitors too. I mean, we in the media and you and the fans, I mean, we might sit back and go, yeah, it's JT Daniels. But, hey, you can bet that Carson Beck and Brock Vandegrift come to practice every day competing. I mean, these are guys that I don't know that they've ever been number 2 at anything in their life, much less number 3. So these are some young guys that are trying to get better, that I think JT takes that leadership role. He coaches them. He teaches them. I think they work with him in these organized workouts. As JT said, it's a really healthy quarterback room. And I know people have said that before. And I know coach speak is to say you have great leadership, but you can really sense with JT that you almost feel like you got a guy that's 21 going on 35. I mean, he's so mature. And Cole Cubilic said in all the years they've done these interviews, that was probably the most impressive interview he's ever done. Cole called me Friday, and Cole's buddy of mine. I hope to get him on tonight. We might not. He's back with his family, and I don't know how early bedtime is. If we can get Cole on, we will. If not, we'll do it another time, I promise. But, he called me, Mike, he said, he's not who we thought he was. I said, well, what are you talking about, Cole? He said, well, he says, the SEC's got this guy wrong. I said, Cole, I've been telling you that. Cole does for 3-Man Front in Birmingham radio show on WJLX. I do that show every Monday. And, I've been telling him about JT Daniels. I've been talking about it on Feinbaum. And certainly, Dog Nation Daily talks every day. We've been telling everybody this about JT. Georgia fans know this. We've been trying to tell you this guy is something special. And the reality, it's just like Georgia and other programs. I mean, if you're being honest, how much do you know about Bryce Young, the Alabama quarterback? Probably not much, right? It's hard to pay attention to more than just your program and really have a command of the knowledge, using one of Kirby's words. So people could glance out of the corner of their eye at Georgia. Oh, yeah, sure, they beat Mississippi State. Oh, it was close. Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, they beat South Carolina. So what? Oh, yeah, they beat Missouri. Big deal. Cincinnati, top 10 team, whatever. They barely beat them. You just get the feeling that Georgia's wins at the end of the year really didn't resonate. Like, so what if JT Daniels beat South Carolina, Missouri, Mississippi State, and Cincinnati? And if you're being honest with yourself, if you turn the tables and there was some Alabama guy that beat those teams, you'd say, so what? Who did he beat? He hadn't beat anybody. And then you look back at his USC career. And his freshman year at USC, what should have been his high school senior year, it was checkered. There were some circumstances. You go back and look, and you go back and watch some of those games. I mean, it's like he was playing shortstop back there. The center exchanges were a problem. We saw how much trouble that was for Dwan Mathis' first game of this year. That was happening to JT all year. He's running for his life. He still had some 300-yard passing games against Notre Dame and Texas, but let's face it, USC was 5-6 that year, and the shine was kind of off his star. That guy that was the Gatorade National Player of the Year, the number 3 ranked quarterback in his class behind Fields and Lawrence. Suddenly, it was like he just kind of fell off the map. And when he went in the portal, some people said, "Oh, look at this! He couldn't beat out Slovis." Well, that wasn't it at all. It was the simple politics of what a quarterback battle can do. Much like when Justin, left Georgia, right? He chose to go somewhere else. Well, JT did too, and thought it would be in his best interest long-term because of Kirby Smart, because of Monken. So what we're seeing is kind of JT's second go-round at stardom at the college level, and people are starting to figure it out. I saw Paul Feinbaum today, and love Paul. Paul's a hot take guy. When he's not grilling somebody else, he's doing the hot takes himself. Now he's throwing JT out there as a Heisman Trophy candidate. To get the talk stirred up. I'm going to be honest. I think it's possible JT could end up in New York at the ceremony, but I don't think he can win the Heisman Trophy. I don't want to say I don't think he can. I don't think it's likely. I don't think that he will. If you ask me, I don't think he has the weapons around him. I don't think he's got the same receiving core that LSU and Alabama did to put up giant numbers. I think the offense will still be balanced. It'll be explosive when it needs to be. But, when I look at this Georgia offense, I really like the way that he uses the backs and the tight ends. But those guys can be explosive. But when I think of explosive offenses, I think of dynamic receivers, right? I think of guys like Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle or Chase at LSU. And I don't know that Georgia has that. Now, we'll see. When Jermaine Burton comes back from injury, I think he's pretty dynamic. Dominic Blaylock, I think he could be special. Marcus Rosemy, Saint strikes me as a little bit more of a possession guy, but I think he's very good. And Justin Robinson is a big target that can go up and really get that back shoulder fade. I like him a lot. Adonai Mitchell showed me something. I want to see more. He's young. Remember, he had 13 targets. Demetrius Robertson has a ton of speed. If he gets the right matchup, he'll blow by you. And I think I like Kyrus Jackson. I like Kyrus as a leader, and I like his toughness. I feel like Kyrus is kind of that. I feel like he's that third down guy, and I feel like he's a red zone guy. I feel like Kyrus is a guy you can count on to be where he's supposed to be and to make some tough plays. I don't know if explosive's the right word for him, but I think he's tough. So I like what Georgia has. I'm just saying I don't think it's as dynamic on the perimeter as what we've seen from LSU and Alabama and even Clemson with T. Higgins and Amari Rodgers when they won their national title. So I think this is going to be very effective offense, a very proficient offense. I think it's an offense that can win a national championship. But I don't know if it's geared towards the ginormous numbers that you see out of an Oklahoma offense or an Ohio State offense or even a Florida offense. But I think it's an offense that gets the job done. And I think it's an offense that will be relentless. I think, when teams take away the run, I think JT's going to take the pass. I mean, the whole beauty of this is it's very chameleon-like. And what I mean by that is JT goes to the line of scrimmage, and there's no defense that covers everything, right? The defense is always giving you something. And it's a matter of, do you have a quarterback that can figure out what? Do you have a quarterback that can, sort through the disguises that defenses might put out there in their coverages, that can pick up on what blitz might be coming next, can read, can call the protections? And more importantly, do you have a battery of quarterback, receiver, running back, tight end that are on the same page? It's one thing for JT to make the right read, but can he communicate it effectively to his receivers, tight ends, and running backs? And can they make the right read? There's certain plays where, depending on how the defense lines up, the receiver runs a route in or out, right? What they call leverage is the defensive back playing outside leverage or inside leverage. And what we mean by that is he's shading you one way or the other. Is he shading you to try to direct you inward, or is he shading you to direct you outward, right? And that's where the quarterback and the receiver have to make the same read. And there's a lot of that in this offense. It's very much a pro-style offense. This is what happens at the NFL level. And it is very complex, and it's not easy to learn, and not everybody can do it. Now, quarterbacks like it, and they come to Georgia because they know that they're going to play in the scheme that's going to prepare them for the NFL. Some schemes don't do that. Now, that said, that doesn't mean they're bad schemes. It just means that they're simplified. And by simplifying a scheme, right, it favors the ability to execute it, but it also makes it a little bit easier for the defense. Well, Georgia, when JT goes to the line of scrimmage, there's a lot of options and there's a lot of trust. So if they can get on the same page, it's beautiful. And it's really hard to defend when these guys are on the same page. Now the area I think JT still needs to work on, and you saw this, was he had 4 sacks. Well, obviously nobody was tackling the quarterback. But if there was an issue with JT, at times he had a propensity to hold the ball, not give up on the play. I think you'll see that in season. He'll get rid of the ball quicker. He knows that he can't help the team on the sideline on crutches. And he also knows that with the type of size and speed in the SEC, that he has to get rid of the ball quicker than he did in the Pac-12. He said that. There's different types of players in the SEC. They're better. And he needs to get better at that, though, for sure. The offensive line, let me finish the quarterbacks first. Carson Beck's a guy I think we're all excited about. I thought the word that I would use for Carson was fluid. Big guy, you see 6'5", big arm. You saw the arm was good whip. A guy with good mobility, good enough mobility. Again, that size makes him hard to bring down. He was 22 of 31 for 236 yards, 2 touchdowns, an interception, only 1 sack. Thought he managed the game well. I thought he looked good. I was impressed. It's too early to say who number 2 is because Stetson has played in games. And, while Stetson may have a few more limitations, you saw that on the ball he hung up deep. He's a wily player. He's a smart player. He gives you more with his feet. He's been in the big games. He's got a considerably greater amount of game action. So I think it would be very circumstantial who's two, but I think Carson sees enough light at the end of the tunnel that he knows that he can stick around and be the guy. And I think Stetson knows what he means to Georgia and what Georgia means to him. I mean, Stetson's a Georgia guy. He came back here. He could have gone somewhere else, albeit not a FBS school. But I think Stetson Bennett will always have a place in folklore. And, even while, some critical analysis was pointed at times, in hindsight, the guy came out and beat Auburn and beat Tennessee and beat Kentucky. And, he was beating Florida 14-0 when he left that game with injury. So I can't put that loss on him. I don't think anybody should. Vandegrift, I know he's the new guy. He's got those red locks of hair coming up from his. I mean, he's quite a spectacle. Obviously, he's just a beefy guy. I think he power cleans over 300 pounds. Power clean is like, I think a power clean is when you put it over your head, right? At least up to your shoulders. But 325 pounds, my goodness, that's like almost lifting Jordan Davis. Jordan's 340 or 350 now. But Brock, what he did well. I liked how Monken schemed for him. Look, this kid's still learning, right? As I said, there's so many moving parts. That's why one of the great quarterback coaches, Steve Clarkson, he says playing in a pro-style offense is like flying a jet. And if you've ever looked in the cockpit of a jet, there's a lot of controls and a lot of buttons and a lot to navigate, right? And when you play pro style, we talked about making all those reads and managing everything at the line of scrimmage. It's just an enormous responsibility. You don't just come from high school and do that. It just doesn't happen. Even JT, had to learn and adjust. And he was, scholarly in the 6th grade, right? I mean, JT's crazy football IQ. Brock is too, but give him time. But what he did, I thought he did well. 6-9, 47 yards. He fumbled a snap, took his eye off the ball. Easy mistake to make. Could happen to anyone. I don't hold that against him. I don't think it was nerves. I just think it was bad timing that it happened in a scrimmage in front of 20,000 people. But I like what I saw. I think with the Carson and the Brock competition of the future, you just stay tuned. They're two great quarterbacks, two really impressive young men that have accomplished a lot in their own right. I just don't think there's a wrong answer there. And ideally, they both stick around. You just don't know what a kid wants. If the end prize is to get to the NFL, it's not the worst thing in the world, to be a backup for a couple of years. I think there's a lot of different things to talk about outside of the quarterbacks from the scrimmage. And what I want to do now is I want to take a break for our sponsor, Ingles. And when we come back, we are going to have Cole Cubilic with us. Cole is the sideline reporter for the SEC Network. He's a former offensive lineman at Auburn. I think he does a great job breaking down all facets of the game. He especially specializes in the offensive line breakdown. I think he's really found a niche there, and I think he's probably the foremost authority of collegiate linemen in the nation. I think the SEC Network's lucky to have him, and we're going to have. I'll tell you what else we're lucky to have. We were lucky to have Ingles during this pandemic. So many things shut down, so much pressure on all of us as we tried to protect our families and stay inside. And yet still, we still needed to have our groceries, our supplies, and the folks at Ingles made that happen for us. And, I appreciate them making this program happen every Monday night, just as I appreciated their role as frontline workers during the pandemic. I want to take this moment now and recognize Ingles.
It's in our hearts to feel for you. There's been ups and downs, turnarounds, good days and some bad. But we stand together for worse and for better. We'll always have your back. With open arms, heart to heart, hand in hand. Community strong.
Well, welcome back to the program. Mike Griffith here, and now joined by my good friend Cole Cubilic, a guy I've got a lot of respect for. I enjoy Cole's show every Monday on WJOX, 3-Man Front. I enjoy being a guest on there and always appreciate when Cole comes on. Cole, welcome to the program tonight.
Thanks for having me, Mike. Good to be with you.
Thanks, man. Well, I went down and I covered the quarterbacks, and my goodness, I think we must have had 10 headlines on them. And I do want to give you a word on this, Cole, because I mentioned it earlier in the program. I took pleasure and even some amusement when you called me Friday and you said, they got this guy wrong. The SEC really doesn't know who JT Daniels is. And I'll let you take it from there, because you did the interview and you ran across you made some really strong statements about JT.
Yeah, I don't know if there's if he's misunderstood, because I just think that maybe most people don't really know what their understanding should be, because we haven't really had a chance to get to know him. He hasn't spent a ton of time in front of the media. He hasn't gone through SEC media days. He hasn't spent a ton of time in front of the camera, obviously only starting a quarter of the season at the end of the season. And I just think that people probably look at him and say, Southern California kid, obviously played at Southern California, from Southern California. He's got the surfer hair and the mustache, and people probably think that he's just this West Coast weirdo. And it could be further from the truth. He is not someone that is playing football because of his talent. He's playing football because of how much he loves it. And I don't think Tom knew that. I don't think Jordan knew that. I don't think I knew that when we had a chance to sit down with him. And we were introduced to that. And it wasn't just him saying it that made us believe it. It was him describing and detailing his process, his weekly regimen during the season, and being able to hear how detailed and how organized he is with his preparation. I don't think I've heard another college football player really go at it that way. And it was really impressive. I think him working with Jordan Palmer out in Southern California at a very young age probably has a lot to do with that. I think that helped a lot. I think the high school program that he played in helped a lot, because I think that's one that the expectations are ramped up as high as maybe any other program in the country. The expectations are as high as anywhere else in the country. And that prepared him for what he was getting into. But even then, there's guys that get to college and they don't take the extra step on their own. They don't go as far as he's going on their own to be able to prepare themselves for what they're going to get week in and week out. So there's obviously different ways to do it. I could tell you about Mac Jones's spiral notebooks, for every opponent that he has, that he still has and carries with him. But this was completely different, and his schedule blew us away. And it was impressive to hear him talk about some of the things that he's gone back and done. He told us that he went back a couple of weeks ago and he watched all of Alex Smith 2017, just watched the whole season and studied his footwork and studied his mechanics. And you just think, I hadn't come across a receiver that said that they went back and studied, Randy Moss in 07 or whatever. I mean, you don't hear those kind of things. So you get different guys that study different NFL players, but I think the way that it's done and the organization behind it just made it that much more impressive. And then just hearing him talk about the game and how he adjusts his own mechanics and how he wants to succeed and how he wants to help the other guys around him. Hearing him talk about his teammates too. I mean, it made you understand how much football means to him. And I think a lot of times, this is not necessarily fair, but California kid transfers out of USC after losing the starting job, and people are like, all right, well, he just ain't into it. And, he's a guy that maybe doesn't have the drive or the determination. He gave up too easy. And like I said, I do not believe that SEC fans have any idea what this kid's all about, because I think he's all about football. And it was pretty impressive to be able to hear him talk about those things and detail some of those things for us.
Yeah, I agree, Cole. I've been impressed with JT and getting to know his family a little bit. And, he is a football junkie. And, he has been since the sixth grade, a guy that has had a great understanding, as you mentioned, all those notebooks. He's been prepared for this moment. And, I think the USC thing was kind of sticky. I think ultimately all will come out in the wash. But you know how hard it is when you lose your job to an injury and the next guy up does a really good job and builds that relationship with the position coach. And suddenly you realize that it may not even be a matter of who's better so much as who they're more comfortable with. I use Jake Fromm and Justin Fields as an example of that. It would have been very hard. People go, oh, well, Justin didn't want to stick around and compete. Well, he was competing with 2 years of equity and a lot of trust that Jake Fromm had earned by leading a team to a national title. Well, it wasn't that Keaton Slovis had done that, but Slovis had built a very strong relationship with Graham Harrell, and there was going to be an awkward odd man out situation. And rather than force that issue politically, why not look elsewhere? And especially when you look at what USC had coming back compared to the opportunity that JT found at Georgia, where it's kind of like almost plug and play. Now, Pickens being out, I still think they have a good supporting cast, but Cole, you're a guy that travels around the league every week. We see you at a different football game in the SEC. You're very familiar with the talent across the league. What do you foresee for this Georgia offense?
I think it's going to be a fantastic offense. I think it's going to be a fascinating watch because I think that there will be micro areas of growth throughout the course of the season. I think the first one to watch will be the offensive line. I'm not necessarily sold on the first offensive line that you get will be the offensive line that starts the majority of the games, because I think there are some younger guys that are going to have a chance to play their way in. And also, I think, too, when you have maybe some continuity and chemistry issues, you just lean towards experience, because that'll get you out of trouble more times than maybe talent will. I think there's enough talent across the board in that receiver room to be able to get away with everything they need to be a successful offense. This group's going to be balanced, but I think the number one goal for them going into this year is create more explosive plays. Well, you look at some of the tight ends, you look at some of the running backs, some of the other wide receivers, there's going to be enough guys around to be able to help create those explosive plays. And what they're going to be able to do with alignment and mismatches physically, I think is going to help them be able to create the things that they want to create. I wouldn't be surprised if they go a little bit faster at times this year. It's not going to be how they operate on an every down basis, but I think they'll have that in their arsenal. And then, I think that plain and simple, you got a quarterback that can stretch the field. And that's the reality of it. So, whether you're taking an AD Mitchell, who I think has a lot of twitch, had a nice touchdown catch in the spring game Saturday, or you're taking a Darnell Washington who gets a size mismatch down the middle of the field, you're going to have those opportunities because you're not going to be able to focus too much attention on one area. You want to load the box? They're going to have guys who can win one-on-ones. They're going to have guys who can physically win their matchups. They're going to have guys who can stretch the field. You and I have been talking. You called me about Demetrius Robinson when he transferred from Cal, like 2 days after he announced it. We've been talking about him for years. He looked pretty good in the spring game. Made a couple plays, got some separation. So there aren't too many guys out there like George Pickens. The difference with him, and I was watching this kid for Alabama, Asia Hall, in their spring game, and he kind of reminds me of George, where certain guys seem to remove the ball from the air. Other guys allow the ball to come to them. George rips the ball out of the air. He doesn't give the defender an opportunity to make a play. Like he almost catches the ball in a violent way. The Hall kid at Alabama is similar to that. A guy that you watch. Jerry Jeudy was that kind of a guy at Alabama. AJ Green was that kind of a guy when he was at Georgia. I don't think you can coach it. I think you just kind of have it. I think it's in your mentality, and George has that. So he can be an eraser. He can be dynamic. He can be a safety valve. However you want to label it. But I asked Kirby. I said, do you think there could be part of this that because he's not out there, that maybe JT's had to operate in a little bit of a different way this spring, just making sure he gets through his progressions, knowing that he doesn't have that bailout, so everything else has to process correctly. And he admitted, he thinks that could absolutely be accurate, that he knows what it's like to have that guy. He's seen quarterbacks have that guy. He's a defensive coach. He's known that there's going to be times where you just throw it up to that guy. So he thinks that it actually could end up being a positive for how JT operates and manages the offense. And then I think that the other part to think about here is George wants to come back. George's coaching staff wants him to come back this year, this season. So you look at that schedule, Mike. I'm not telling you anything. You get past Clemson, and hell, even if you don't, you shouldn't lose another game before the postseason. So let's just say, he comes back. I think it's Tennessee, Charleston Southern, Georgia Tech. What if he went, 10, 12 plays, 15, 20 plays, 25, 30 plays. Well, and all of a sudden he's ready for the postseason, conditioning wise, comfort level, all of that. Well, there's not a bunch of film on him in the offense for people to go be able to say, okay, in this formation, we're taking this route away. When he's lined up here, he's running this. You're just not going to have a ton of it. Not enough, I don't think, to truly get, a guy's tendencies. So you add that to an offense that's probably already pretty good for the home stretch, that could be really dangerous and maybe even work out a little bit more advantageous than if you had him the whole year. So, I think they're going to be fine without him. I think you got other guys that are going to be able to step up. And if you could get him back for that home stretch, that last third of the season and then into the postseason, that could be something wild to watch.
Yeah, Cole, you outlined the best case scenario for Georgia there. I think that's a scenario that could put Georgia in the national championship game. I think they could make it without George, period. I don't know how quickly he'll heal or to what extent, but certainly you paint a very strong scenario. Kirby Smart, the Pickens family wants George back in November. Ideally, you hope he's back at 100%. Can he be the same guy that he was before? Boy, if he could, as you said, that would really be the icing on the cake. We saw Jalen Waddle this year get back, and he just wasn't quite the same guy. But Alabama had grown enough in his absence,
Right.
that I thought that somewhat mitigated that. It's pretty impressive when you can lose your best guy like Alabama did and still set all these wonderful records in the number two.
Well, I think, and that's a totally different injury too. I mean, the better comp might be like Terrell Lewis a couple of years ago, who came back late on an ACL and was able to contribute. I mean, you're talking about a guy in Waddle who had a plate and screws put in his ankle. I mean, just the healing process takes a lot longer there than for an ACL. So, man, that's such a common injury in sports today that I mean, as long as things heal on track, and from what I've heard, he didn't have any other damage to the knee. I mean, it was pretty just much a clean ACL tear, which I've had. You can do a lot of the conditioning before you actually get back to compete. Your body can be ready once that thing gets healed up. So there are ways to make that happen. And I would say right now it's more probable than doubtful that we see him play in regular season games this year.
Wow, that's good. That's a strong comment from Cole Cubilic. Cole, a sideline reporter, ESPN analyst with the SEC Network. Cole does a great job breaking it down. I love the broadcast team, you and Tom and Jordan Rogers. You guys got a great chemistry. I think that's the best broadcast team out there. I don't think I'm being biased. I think you guys have a lot of insight as former players, and I think Tom is really smooth with the play-by-play. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the offensive line. That's been a concern, and after the scrimmage, Kirby Smart said that that's the position that needed to make the largest leaps. Now, in all fairness, Cole, they were going up against a pretty good defensive line. Give me your thoughts on Georgia at the line of scrimmage, who you like and what you foresee there for the Bulldogs.
Well, I don't even think, yes, they were going up against a good defensive line. I'm not doubting that, but they also went up against everything that defense runs. I mean, literally, go back and watch it. I asked Kirby about it at halftime, and he said they ran two pressures. I'm not buying it. And maybe it was two pressures. It may have been two pressures, but it was two pressures with every stunt that they have as well. Right. Because I mean, it was twists, stunts. I mean, they ran that wild defense with nobody had their hand on the ground one time. I saw linebacker defensive line games. I saw 3- and 2-man games with the defensive linemen. And the good part is you're learning on the run. You're seeing everything that those guys have. The bad part is they missed a lot of it. And that can't happen. You can't, not against Clemson and not against SEC teams. Those guys are going to have enough ability to be able to get to your quarterback on their own. You start turning them loose, and that's when you get guys hurt. That's when you get guys knocked out of the game. But I think the talent is there. I think there are two positions that this Georgia team they have the guys. They just need the time. And Kirby outlined it. He's like, we got 25 practices until we play Clemson. It's not a lot when you think about it. I mean, really, and one of them was Saturday, so you're down to 24. That's not a lot of time to get guys ready who haven't played a ton of football or on the offensive line played a ton of football together. But I mean, I look at a guy like, I could not stop watching 65. Like I mean, and I talked to Matt Luke at halftime, and I'm like, Coach, I don't know if I've seen a more beautiful freshman tackle prospect than this young man. I mean, Amarius Mims at 6'7", 310, 315, whatever he is, with that big old bubble butt and that small waist and arms that look like they just, I mean, he looks like Plastic Man with that wingspan. You're just like, God made an offensive tackle when he made that guy, like legitimately. He said, here, this kid's going to be a tackle. Here you go. There's 4 guys on that offensive line that could legitimately play, probably not all together, that are 6'6" and 310 or more. And, you know, that kind of a sidebar, Mike, that was my biggest takeaway from the entire team. A lot of people would have said, oh, running back room is stacked, or, you know, maybe AD Mitchell is going to help make some plays, or maybe they just saw Washington. You know, JT Daniels stuck out to a lot of guys. Maybe the arm strength of Vandergriff, how Carson Beck handled himself. My biggest takeaway was just the physical presence of this team. They have guys that not a lot of college football teams have anything like. I mean, I mentioned Mims. You look at Washington, you know, and, you know, I posted the picture and said, this is a 280-pound tight end, because Kirby told us. When I asked, my first question to Kirby was about Washington, because I love the fact that he was a willing blocker last year. I know he probably wasn't into it. We didn't love it. But you know what? The guy would put his face mask in somebody's chest and at least try to move them. You know, Eric Gilbert was the same way. Kyle Pitts was the same way. Like, Pitts didn't bully anybody off the ball, but at least he get out there and try. There's a lot of these tight ends, they don't even want to try. They just flex me out, give me one-on-ones, let me run routes, and that's all they want to do. And at 6'7", he's got pretty good bend. He's got pretty good flexibility. I would have never guessed he's 280. And then to see the way he moved around in that game and caught 4 balls, I'm just thinking, holy hell, 6'7", 280, he's doing these things. And he's lining up outside wide, you know, on a single set, one-on-one. He's in line with his hand on the ground next to the tackle. He's lined up in the slot, lined up as an H-back. They're going to use him a lot of different ways. And I posted that picture. And, you know, people on Twitter can say, oh, right tackle, or, oh, can't catch. Well, I saw him catch 4 in that game. I was there. I was on the sideline. And, I mean, I can see his waist in the picture. It's like, I don't know why anybody thinks he's fat, and that's why he's 280. I mean, look at the damn picture. I posted it. It's there. It's visual evidence for you to look at. But, you know, Jordan Davis, we know what he is. 6'6", he's probably 350 right now. He's gonna lose a bit more for the fall. And you put him next to Wyatt at 6'3", 320. I mean, this Adam Anderson kid's gonna play star at 6'5", 230.
Yeah.
He's gonna line up as a star. You know, I mean, Amir Speed. I look out there and I see a 6'3", 211-pound a cornerback. And that, it doesn't mean that they're all the best players on the field. It doesn't mean that they're all going to dominate every play. But I just came away thinking this team physically has a lot of things that nobody they're going to play is going to have as much of. I mean, you just size, mass, girth mismatches that they are going to have against certain people. It's kind of scary to see. And when you pair that with talent, with ability, with good coaching, you know, with being able to match up against people who just can't flat out deal with it, you got some problems on your hands. So I think the offensive line has a couple of those guys. They just got to find the right ones, and they just need snaps together. That's it. And they need to, I mean, that's a group. Somebody's got to, you know, I don't know if Van Pron's going to be the guy, or, you know, Rutledge, Erickson, whoever. Someone's got to get those guys out there in the summer, and they got to go work their steps and work their scheme and work their blocks and work their calls every single day. That's what they got to do. You know, that's what LSU did 2 years ago. Is after 2018, they said, you know what? It ain't going to be our fault next year. And there's a couple leaders on that group, and they got them together, and they went out there, and they were out there on Saturday mornings, just working steps, working calls, working pass sets, working on blitz pickups. And that's what this group needs. They just need time together. The talent's there, the ability's there. I think corner and offensive line, 2 groups that this team, they have the potential, they have the talent, they have the players. They just don't have the time that's already been with it. So does that take 2 weeks? Does it take 6 weeks? Does it not happen? We don't know the answer to that. But if both of them happen fairly early, even with a loss to Clemson, this team's going to be in pretty good shape by the end of the season.
Yeah, I agree, Cole. You pointed out the schedule, and certainly it is forgiving. Unlike last year, which, man, the SEC dealt them a really tough hand right out of the gate. Arkansas, we thought was going to be a layup, wasn't a layup really for anybody. That was a tough opener. And then they ran into Auburn, and and then they were actually trailing Tennessee at halftime, and then they're somehow beating Alabama at halftime and lose that game, and then they have to play a physical Kentucky team, and then four guys get injured there, and then it's Florida. I mean, there was no breathing room, there was no real opportunity for this offense to settle in under first year coordinator Monken, who didn't have spring, and it was just like
So
Georgia was playing.
take all that too, Mike, with just flat out not knowing who you are.
Right, no identity.
Just not
exactly.
you didn't know, you're searching for it, and that's not because they couldn't find it. It's because it kind of wasn't there, and then you're juggling quarterbacks, and then I mean, I think we all have a pretty good idea of what was happening in that room as far as maybe trying to keep a guy around, maybe trying to keep a guy happy, maybe not sure if a guy's ready to go. I mean, they were walking on eggshells with a lot of that stuff, and so now they don't have that. I mean, they go into this year saying, "This is who we are. This is what we're good at. This is what we can probably add because we think we can get away with it. This is what we don't need to go anywhere near. And now let's do what we're the best at, and then let's make it as difficult to defend as possible." That's a totally different mentality going into a season. The confidence level that you can derive from that, as opposed to, we hope we can get it done doing this, or maybe we'll be okay doing that, or God, I hope the defense plays lights out. That's not the way to go into a season offensively, and Georgia will have a completely different. And that's the thing. A lot of people say, "Oh, what about corner? Linebacker's not going to be the same." You're right. It won't be, but that offense is going to protect them a lot more than they did last year. They will offer a lot more assistance. So
For sure. Kirby's got more trust, now that he's more familiar with what Monken's doing, and now that Monken's found a quarterback that fits his scheme. We talked about how much that JT can do at the line of scrimmage, and it gets back to what you're saying though. They've got the pieces and the parts, but how well can they execute? And what are these guys going to be willing to invest? I mean, you said it best, Cole. LSU won the 2019 national championship in the offseason with the amount of work that Joe Burrow and that team invested in. The same could be said for Alabama. Mac Jones had come in towards the end of the previous season when Tua had gotten hurt and taken over and invested his time. And that JT will invest his time. The receivers will, certainly, to be on the same page. There's so much competition for targets. They know they better show up. But to your point, is the offensive line going to be out there getting their steps down? Can Matt Luke sort it out? We do know they like the versatility and flexibility of playing guys everywhere. Well, okay, you've had 15 practices to do it. It's time to make some hard and fast decisions and dial it in. I don't know if Amarius Mims, Cole, will be ready at the start of the year, but I'm with you. It's just a matter of time. Broderick Jones, I don't know how much you had a chance to watch him at right tackle. Did you have any thoughts on him? Because I'm hearing that he might ultimately have the best feet. I just don't know how quickly he might supplant Truss at left tackle.
No, he did, and I think that he was the guy that I kind of left off that physical list. But I mean, he fits the bill as far as just guys that you see him and you think, well, he's different, and he does have good change of direction. He's got good body control. The majority of the issues that I saw came inside, as far as blitz pickup and twist, stunt pickup, different things, trading off twists, sticking with the slant, different things like that. And I'm not going to say that every single one of them was on that group. There could have been a tight end. There could have been a running back. There could have been miscommunication between them and the quarterbacks. There are a lot of different things that it could have been. But that's got to be shored up. The communication part has to be situated. I did think Broderick looked pretty good. And, we know Jamari's a guy that can move around. We've seen him play tackle. We've seen him play guard. So, maybe you're looking for your best five and then trying to figure out, he's one of them. So you're just trying to see where you're weakest, and then maybe you plug him in there. Or maybe where you're youngest and you plug him in early, knowing that you're going to have some veterans with what you're going to get first couple games of the season. So, and the other part of it too is you take a guy like a Zamir White, and then you take some of these tight ends, they're going to have a lot of help. And, that's the other advantage of, this tight end room. We haven't mentioned Fitzpatrick. And I mean, he's another, 6'7", 255. I mean, he's another big body that I told you last year, early in the season when we talked, I was like, 86 is the one helping him get it done in the run game now. and no one's talking about him. And he's a guy that physically is going to help and provide some assistance up there. So I don't think it's just about those tight ends, helping blocking the run game. You can move them around in the pass game, and then helping in protection is also going to be massive. Just widening the pocket out can help sometimes. Give you a good chip. Darnell had one really nice chip on one of the routes that he ran. You had a big old slam, and he goes out and catches a pass. Like, that's the stuff that Thaddeus Moss did so well for LSU in 2019. So they can help in other ways, and having those extra big bodies, I think, is really going to benefit that offensive line early if they're still struggling.
Yeah, a lot of people like that ace set. It's really popular in the NFL. It creates a lot of matchup issues. Very difficult for a defense, because now they got to be very careful and choosy what personnel they put out there. If you don't go big enough, they're going to run it down your throat. If you go too big, those tight ends can exploit you. And I don't think it was a coincidence that Fitzpatrick only caught one pass. I think he's going to be very involved. And I think we do have to keep in mind that offense and defense was somewhat vanilla. In terms of the coverages, certainly it was vanilla. The fronts, I don't think they're ever vanilla with Kirby. I think you're right. I know Kirby said there were only 3 pressures the whole game, but like you said, within those pressures, that was a very active and challenging front. And that's the way they want it. And it does compensate somewhat for the inexperience on the back end. I noted JT was sacked 4 times. The line got pushed back into him with some of those big, strong, physical guys you mentioned, Trayvon Walker, Nolan Smith, a couple other superhero type of body athletes. I'm with you on that, Cole. I like Georgia physicality on defense, and I think they're set up. And I threw this theory out there earlier today at you on the 3-man front. I almost wonder, Adam Anderson, I don't think that's a guy you're going to see out there at the star when you're playing another spread team that goes 4 wide. But if Alabama's going to be an RPO team, I wonder if this is a matchup for Alabama, because I don't really know much, and maybe you can enlighten us a little bit. I don't know that Bryce Young is going to be the thrower that Mac was, or that Joe Burrow was.
I think he can be the thrower, but not the passer.
Okay.
He's got the arm. He's got the arm ability, but I don't know if he has the accuracy and the consistency just yet. And I think you even saw some of that on Saturday. That'll come with time. But yes, he's a little more dynamic, moving around, very twitchy, change of direction, can start and stop very rapidly, can get the ball out, can change where he wants to go with the ball very quickly.
Is there a comparison? Is there a guy you can compare him to recently? There's been a lot of mobile quarterbacks in the SEC.
Yeah, I don't really have. I mean, he's different than some of the mobile quarterbacks we've seen recently, because I think he can start and stop so fast. I mean, there's one that pops into my brain, and I'm not even going to do that to him.
You're going to say Michael Vick, weren't you?
I'm not going there, because it's one of the most electric college football players we've ever seen, and I'm not going to do that to a kid that's barely played in a college game. But his change of direction and ability to start, stop, and get to something else very quickly is very good. And it's something that's going to be a problem for a lot of teams. So, and a lot of that's going to be on his own. It's not going to be coached. It's going to be, okay, this, I don't like that. Go to something else. That's not there. And then, find something else. And whether it's running around the backside of a pass rush and 6 and out, or whether it's, finding a guy who loops out of the backfield because everybody's trailing in the other direction, he's going to give you some of those plays. But, I think too, one of the big things against RPOs is eliminating windows. And if you can get a guy that's 6'5" with a wingspan there, it's like Will Muschamp would tell you that Javon Kinlaw, when they were at South Carolina, the majority of his value against the pass was, number one, getting a push, denting the pocket. And then number 2 was his wingspan, because he had those giant paws and those long arms that, he just took away passing lanes. And with all these offenses, Will was the first one that I heard. He was the first guy that told me, when I was asking about Kinlaw, he said, Cole, I think we are rapidly approaching where an interior pass rusher is becoming more valuable than an edge rusher, because everything's getting out so quick and everything is so rapid fire. None of these guys are taking 5 and 7 step drops. They're not. None of them are taking those elongated play action drops. Now, Alabama actually did last year. They were more play action than RPO, a lot heavier play action than RPO, but they also had a motion-based offense that allowed for that based on the matchups that they found and what they forced you to do. But if you can get a guy who can dent the pocket, or you can get a guy who can stand in some of those passing lanes and just with their length or their size, remove a big portion of it, especially if you got a pretty good. I mean, if you're going to run an RPO, you got a guy lined up in the slot. I mean, based on the quarterback reading the fake to the running back, I mean, how many different routes can you run? There's 2 or 3 you can run, maybe not even 3 that are really going to hurt you. So if you get a guy that can just remove a bunch of space, a bunch of air, and just force that quarterback to say, no, I'm not, hand it off. I don't want any part of that. I'm not doing that. Just we'll give it to the back. Well, you win. I mean, I think in the RPO game, with as efficient as a lot of these passers are now, if they hand it off, that's a win. Like you'll take that. It's almost like walking Barry Bonds. Like that's a win for us. We'll take that. Hand it to your back. Don't let Devonta Smith catch a slant. That's a loss. Give it to the back, and especially with this D line. I mean, hell, if you got this D line, the more you make an RPO team hand it off, just keep checking W's all the way across the board, because those guys are going to handle their business up front. So, yeah, I think his size and his length could be something against RPO teams that pose a real problem. Now, if they start getting a bunch of time and they want to start challenging 4 verticals and they want to run them down the seam, that might be a little bit problematic. But, I think right now it'll be mainly for early downs. And like you said, against specific teams to try to take specific things away.
What does Alabama bring back on the offensive line? I don't want to turn this into the Crimson Tide hour, but they did. I do believe they won the award. The Moore Award is the best offensive line in the country. What do they got coming back? Is this an area where Georgia should have a distinct advantage even at the end of the year after some time to develop for those young Tide?
I mean, I would think so. Evan Neal is going to go from right tackle to left tackle, and he would belong on that list of college football hulks that we brought up earlier. I mean, just a guy whose size is unlike anything that you've ever seen. Chris Owens will be back. He's got a chance to play some center. Darian Dalcourt has not played, but a guy that I really like. He'll be in there, be in the mix. But there going to be a lot of new faces. I mean, Alex Leatherwood is going to be gone. Landon Dickerson is going to be gone. Deontay Brown is going to be gone. So you did have to replace Dickerson late, and that's where Chris came in and played some. So that'll help you. Emil Okior is also going to be back. Played some guard for him last year, but he's not going through spring. So they're kind of beat up right now. It's tough to tell exactly what they're going to look like. You've got like 2.5 starters technically that are returning. So, and you got a new offensive line coach and a new offensive coordinator. So it'll be very different for that group this season.
Is there any other team or who would be the most likely team, if not Alabama, for Georgia to face in the SEC championship game? Is A&M close? I know Jimbo had moved the needle a bit last year.
They are close. They are close. But this Haynes King, Zach Calzada race at quarterback is going to be fun to watch, because I think Haynes is. I mean, he's more of the, he's more the mobile guy, the quick twitch, can move around. Calzada, big arm. I mean, throws a beautiful football. Highly rated prospect coming out, can stretch the field. But the offensive line is going to be really good. I know they lost a lot of pieces, but Kenyon Green is the best offensive lineman returning in the SEC. He might go to left tackle. Layden Robinson came in at guard against South Carolina, was absolutely dominant. I think he's going to be a big-time player. I've talked to Jimbo about him. They love him. You got another one of the Matthews kids that's coming in ready to play. I mean, it's just like, I don't know when that football tree is ever going to get cut down. It's almost like the punters up there in Tennessee. They keep chugging them out, and the Matthews offensive linemen they keep rolling them out. They got another one that's getting ready to play up there, and they got a big transfer in that could potentially help them also. And they'll have, they're going to be elite at skill, mainly at running back, but you've got A-Chain who can kind of move around, maybe go to the slot, do different things. I think receiver is a big question mark for them. The defense can be great. Now Bobby Brown's gone, but most of the rest of the defensive line is going to be back. Michael Clemens is back. We've been waiting on him for a few years. Majority of the secondary returns, and they got a great defensive coordinator. I mean, Elko does a really nice job with that group. So they're going to be in the mix, but a couple big question marks. I'm just telling you, I'm not sold that LSU stays down. I'm really not. And I think from a talent perspective, top to bottom, LSU is next in line. Man, I would say it's Alabama, Georgia, LSU, just talent and just flat out ability, because you got two quarterbacks. I mean, first off, TJ Finley has started more games than any of them, but it's going to be Miles Brennan or Max Johnson. They've both played and both played well. I think Dre Jenkins is going to be a good receiver for them. Keyshawn Boutte has more receiving yards in a single game than any receiver in the history of this conference. Now, granted, he did it against the Ole Miss defense last year, so should probably have an asterisk next to it. But the kid's going to be a big-time Saturday in their spring game. He's going to be a big-time playmaker. Most of the offensive line's back. Ed Ingram has a chance to be the best guard in the league, especially if Kenyon Green moves to tackle. Eichenberg's back at center, the Harvard transfer, played good ball for him last year, so they got a brain there that can play. Deculus feels like he's been starting at right tackle for 11 years. He's back. You got two guys that have rolled in and out at left tackle that return. And, tailback's going to be interesting to watch. They don't have our, what we're used to as an LSU tailback, I don't think, but I don't think it's necessarily going to be something that hamstrings them. And then on defense, that's where I think people are really sleeping, because you got two good interior defensive linemen that have played a lot of ball in this league. Ali Gay is going to be able to get to the quarterback. Olajari is going to be able to get to the quarterback. You might have the best player in college football coming back in that secondary. We just forgot about Derek Stingley.
Right.
He just doesn't play anymore. I mean, you got Derek Stingley back. You got Eli Ricks coming back, Southern California kid. You got Cordell Flott, who played a lot of nickel, played some corner. He's coming back in that secondary. Damone Clark is going to be the next LSU linebacker that they just kind of plug and go with. It's going to be sideline to sideline thumper that can just flat out play. That defense, if that defense schematically is on board, and I think it's going to be a lot better than last year, they're going to be good. They're going to be really good. And they might be next in line behind Alabama in the West.
Yeah, you never know which way the ball is going to bounce. You don't know who's going to stay healthy, who's going to get hot, what the matchups will be like. So much of it, Cole, when you play teams, how well they're playing. I think, as you mentioned with Georgia, kind of catch them early. If you don't catch them early, I think they're going to be, as you said, really good by the end of the year, especially if George Pickens can get back. And good to hear that you're optimistic. I know a lot of Georgia fans are going to be charged up by that. Kirby was optimistic about it as well, and so was Pickens. I look at the Georgia team and I say, boy, if they can get that outside threat, if Jermaine Burton can grow into that guy, if Dominic Bled, it's a lot of ifs, right? It's a lot of ifs. And then the backfield, I'm still bullish on Kendall Milton. I thought Zamir White played well. He improved his pass catching. But honestly, I don't know that I see that Najee Harris dynamic. I think Milton could be that eventually. But right now, I don't see DeAndre Swift was a game breaker, was a game changer. Kenny McIntosh could be that when he comes back. A lot of unproven guys, Cole. But to your point, a lot of upside and a lot of potential.
Well, and then I think you have Cook, who could be kind of the move guy, where he can hurt you in the slot. You can motion him into the backfield, out of the backfield. I mean, think about how much success Alabama had with movement last year, whether it was Devonta Smith or Najee Harris. Go back to LSU 2019. The biggest difference between LSU 2019 and LSU 2020 on offense was pre-snap movement, and it's very easy to see. How many times do we see Clyde Edwards-Helaire lined up out wide, motion into the backfield? Not motion, catch a quick screen. And so I think Cook can kind of be that guy that you can use to move around. You saw him take the little jet sweep early in the game, catch the ball out of the backfield. So he's someone that I think, you identify him as a running back, but he might not be lined up there very often. So then he becomes a matchup problem. Or if he pulls a linebacker out of the box with him, boom, there's your run look. So don't be surprised if you see some two-back stuff also. I think you have the option to be 2 and 3 tight end, 1 back, 2 back, no back. I mean, there are a lot of different ways that they're going to be able to go with a lot of the flexibility that they're going to be offered via personnel.
And they're going to adjust it based on who they're playing. And that's what Todd Monken does. As I said, there's always an answer. The defense is always giving you something. Can you find it? Can you manipulate it? Cole, I can't thank you enough for all your time tonight. I know you had a busy weekend. You were here in Athens. Glad to see you back with the family. Glad to have you back on the Beach show. Absolutely. Anytime you need me, Mike, let me know. Great stuff from Cole Cubilic. He does the 3-man front on WJOX every day. You need to check that out. And certainly we'll see Cole on the sidelines all fall along with the SEC network with the A-team, Jordan Rogers and Tom Hart. Cole Cubilic, thanks again, man. Anytime, Mike. Appreciate it. Great stuff from Cole Cubilic. Appreciate everybody watching the show tonight. Before I close, do want to mention the baseball team. I've been following along closer. I don't know if you saw, but Scott Strickland had his contract extended This was a team that took 2 or 3 from the Vandy boys last weekend. This most recent weekend, they battle back and they take 2 or 3 from Kentucky. Now, Kentucky's not a juggernaut, but Kentucky is a more seasoned team that's won some series. And for Georgia to win that series, it was another step. This is a young Georgia team, a young pitching staff. The bats are starting to come around. They got a big series in Missouri. Now, again, Missouri not a top-notch team, but this is the kind of series that if Georgia baseball is going to go into the postseason, they need a sweep. They need a sweep on the road at Missouri. This is a program. They're better than Missouri. It's a program they should be better than. They need a sweep on the road to establish themselves as contender, get ranked in more of these polls. I said they're number 20 in the collegiate baseball poll, but they're not ranked in some of the other ones. Right now, what are they? The 8th, the 9th, the 10th best team in the league. That's not good enough, right? So this is a team that's got some momentum. Tomorrow night, they do play Clemson at home. Remember when Clemson was good at baseball? Well, they're not anymore. Georgia shut them out earlier this year. That game's in Athens. Now, I'm not saying Georgia's going to win because it's one of those midweek games and try to get some younger pitchers some work. What's really important is the SEC series and making sure you're set up for that at Missouri. Saw the national championship equestrian team, right? How about that? Georgia not horsing around in equestrian beat SMU Saturday night. I got that press release from the great Hall of Fame sports information director, Claude Felton, and I said, I got to get something up on this. And there were actually some pretty cool pictures from equestrian. You got to have an appreciation, for how those young women handle themselves and the amount of training and hard work they put in. Listen, you win a national championship in anything, it's an achievement. And so that was a congratulations. The softball team getting swept at home by Arkansas. Don't want to be too much of a Debbie Downer, but, Georgia should be good at softball. I'm just going to tell you, there's a lot of talent in this state. That sport has a lot of television popularity, actually better television ratings than college baseball or college hockey. And with all the talent Georgia produces, I'm starting to wonder a little bit about the direction of that program. This is a team that should be a perennial regional finalist. This is a team that has done a decent job getting the World Series once every 3 years, but you got 7 seniors this year and they're not doing well. This could be something Josh Brooks takes a long, hard look at in terms of the ceiling for women's softball and where it's at and where it should be. So I'm keeping an eye on that. That's going to be interesting to watch moving forward. I think we would all agree that the G-Day game was a success. You heard a lot of great insights from Cole Cubilic. I know a lot of you have had opinions, and I appreciate you expressing them in the comments. I wasn't as diligent as normal interacting in the comments because I had so much to say about the game. And then, of course, Cole is just dynamic. You can see that he's an absolute rising star in the ESPN ranks. Again, a friend and someone I've worked with a long time, even back when Cole was doing radio in Huntsville with the ump. I was on his show regularly as far back as when I was covering Michigan State. So Cole and I have been talking for a long time, and he is very giving and gracious with his time, shared a lot of great insights with Dog Nation that you won't hear from anyone else. And this is stuff he got from being on the sideline and from covering all the schools. So that's a very valuable perspective, and I really appreciate Cole joining us tonight. I'm going to cut it short. It's 9:30. I guess we've gone about an hour. It's a little bit later. Just did the show to get Cole on again. He wanted to spend some time with his children before bed. And so we went a little bit later. I thought it might be worth it. I think you would agree that it was. Tomorrow, Dog Nation Daily, every day. Tomorrow night, Connor Riley. Wednesday, Before the Hedges. And Thursday, Cover 4. And you know how much fun that is. I want to thank my producer, Michael Carvel. I want to wish everybody a happy week. Thanks for joining me tonight on Ingles on the Beat.